We return now to our top story of the hour, the FBI's renewed background investigation into Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. The New York Times reports that the Bureau is set to complete its investigation into allegations of sexual assault as early as Wednesday. That's 2 days ahead of the Friday deadline imposed by the White House. The limits on the scope of the investigation have left key senators unsure of what they'll get back from the FBI. Here's Alaska Republican Lisa Murkowski.
I have had a conversation with Mr. McGahn about the extent of what the FBI is doing. And what I have been assured is that they're conducting this background investigation as they do all background investigations, allowing for the investigation to take its course. So that's important, but what I think we all need to do now is to wait and see exactly what comes back. I don't know what's going to be in it. I don't know that anybody knows what's going to be in it, so I'm not going to speculate. I'm going to wait.
Joining me now is CBS News senior national security analyst Fran Townsend. Fran was George W. Bush's Homeland Security advisor during his second term. Fran, thanks so much for being here. It's always good to have your insight. Let me start with this letter that Christine Blasey Ford's lawyers sent to FBI Director Christopher Wray, asking why neither Dr. Ford nor Brett Kavanaugh are being interviewed as part of the renewed investigation. Is it unusual that they are not included in this?
Well, you would think they would be, right? Because the whole purpose of the reopening of the investigation revolves around her allegations. You know, both have answered extensive questions, both Judge Kavanaugh by the FBI and both then by the Senate Judiciary Committee. But it's different. Right? It's different when you sit down with 2 FBI agents and are asked detailed questions. The other thing is I would have expected those interviews not only to be included, but to come at the end of the investigation, after the FBI agents have gathered whatever additional material they can, so that they're then able to sit down and use that additional material as the basis of questions, both for Ms. Ford and for Judge Kavanaugh. I frankly would find it somewhat shocking to complete this reopened investigation without giving both of them the opportunity to speak with the FBI.
And what about this time frame, right? So you originally had this Friday deadline, which some were saying that was not enough time. And now you have potentially this wrapping up by, tomorrow. I mean, what is your sense of how thorough the investigation can be in that limited time frame?
In fairness, the time frame has never bothered me, right? Because the FBI has the ability to throw all of its resources at a problem. I mean, they could have stopped everything else they were doing to cover this in the amount of time. And so I suspect that the FBI used whatever resources were required to get this done expeditiously and completely. I'm just a little surprised that they wouldn't. Look, they don't have subpoena power, and they don't, they can't compel anyone to speak with them or compel documents. But, for example, you would have thought they might have interviewed Dr. Ford and asked her to waive her privilege and so that her therapist could provide the therapy notes, which would have corroborated the fact that she did or didn't tell her therapist. Those are the sorts of things that I would have anticipated being part of a thorough investigation.
So how should we think about if, in fact, this does wrap up by, let's say Wednesday? How should we think about this investigation?
The president said he was going to be guided by the Republican senators. I think we have to see after Senator Murkowski and Senator Collins and Senator Flake have seen this report, because it's not going to be made public. And so what their view is of the report will matter a lot publicly about what we should think about how thorough it was, how complete it is, and what conclusions they can draw.
And so let's just remind people, the White House agreed to expand the scope of the FBI's investigation on Monday to include, quote, anyone it deems necessary to vet claims of sexual misconduct. So, Fran, when there is guidance like that, how quickly does it go into effect?
Oh, immediately. Look, the FBI agents, before they ever left their building, would have had a list of witnesses that they wanted to interview. Each of those interviews you would have asked the individual, are there others we should speak to who might have been present or have knowledge? And you would have expanded the list from there. But in the in the beginning, we knew from the beginning there were only about a half a dozen interviews they had to do, and then it depended on whether or not they got additional leads.
And those half a dozen people are people who would have been closest to the alleged incident itself.
Right.
So according to The New Yorker, several potential witnesses say that they have been unable to get in contact with the FBI, including someone who is seeking to corroborate Deborah Ramirez's account that Judge Kavanaugh exposed himself to her at a Yale College party. How should the FBI be handling these kinds of, external tips which might be coming in?
So they come in from a variety of ways, right? People will contact their local FBI office. That's one way. They may contact their senator or congressman, as we saw Dr. Ford went through her congresswoman and then to Senator Feinstein. So they come in a variety of ways, and then they get fed into the Bureau. They're then triaged, frankly, just like you'd imagine in an emergency room, based on their relevance, their credibility, and the FBI then parses through them to decide which are merit follow-up.
Let me ask you about, our Paula Reed is reporting the FBI is not currently authorized by the White House to look into facts that could show perjury by Judge Kavanaugh. Given all that has surfaced about Kavanaugh's alleged drinking habits in college, could they look into that? Is that something that could be within sort of the scope of that investigative time frame?
Well, aside from the time frame, if you look at the scope is quite narrow related to the sexual harassment. So it appears that the White House was not authorizing them to look into that unless the drinking is now relevant to the sexual assault allegation, in which case they could look into it. But let's remember, he's a judge. And so if there is a finding for some reason based on the facts that he was untruthful in his testimony, even the president has acknowledged that would be a factor for the Senate to consider.
All right. Fran Townsend. Fran, always great to have you here. Thank you so much, Fran.